participation. First one, the mask reference. That's why we're all here, right? What's happened with this COVID thing and where is it going to take us in terms of the future of workplace? And secondly, the phone reference. I work for a tech company. We're the largest microprocessor design company based in Cambridge, headquartered in the UK. And we announced this morning, quite excitedly, that we've just shipped 200 billion microchips. Say that slowly. Same number of stars that are in the galaxy, apparently. Our CEO tells us.
Question.
Yes.
Where did you get the containers from?
Yeah, didn't make any of them, must say that. Yeah. Oh, I like this audience. Fruity. Thank you. Plenty of time for questions.
Have you got any spares?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll hook you up after. We're based in Cambridge. We employ about 6,000 employees. Most people haven't heard of us because we're fairly low on brand. Arm is the company, and I'm joined by Rob Grant from the Loughborough Schools Foundation and Andrew Tuck from Nationwide, who I'll let do a proper introduction in a moment. It's going to be a varied debate. I'll have to move this on, don't I? There you go. So COVID-19 looks to have changed the landscape for good, with a full-time return to offices set to be ditched for the favour of hybrid working. Will the pace of change continue or accelerate? Who knows? And if so, what will our workspaces and workplace industry look like 10 years from now? That's the premise of today. Excited to be here with the host of this panel of workplace experts as we take a look closer as to what lies ahead. And good to have some interaction. Let's keep that going. The last 24 months has definitely accelerated work as something you do and not somewhere you go. I think we can all attest to that. And now as we try to redefine the workplace, our operating model, our reason for being even, it's important that we apply some different lenses across the journey. And in answering some of the key questions, we'll tackle this here today. So I've got a few slides. It's not death by PowerPoint, please don't worry, just to open us all up to the possibility of a slightly different and changed world. And I hope that'll inspire some discussion and hopefully stimulate some debate as we go forward. There you are. So the balance has certainly shifted for a lot of us. Heard that a lot today. It's been some great debate here today. We left the workplace in 2019 and never will we step foot back in that workplace, that's for sure. We need to maintain connection, accountability, trust, culture, leadership, data and technology, just a few buzzwords that made our organisation successful back in 2019 and now wrestle with these new factors on the right-hand side of the screen. Just hoping the screen had moved on for me. How are we going to do that? I mean, the answer will differ by industry, geography, organisation and context. We can give you 3 of those today, hopefully. But some key early must-haves seem to be coming to the forefront to set us up through a thoughtful and successful transition. The first one, which is very close to my heart, is experimentation. We must break down those silos, the traditional silos and ways of working, and force ourselves and our colleagues to experiment. To fail fast, which is not a word that usually resonates with people in the workplace industry, and learn in order to build back better and for the longer term. Secondly, the third space, and that's been defined as all sorts of different third spaces. One could define the third space as the serviced office in your local town, to a hub and spoke real estate model, to your office at home. And finally, and again, very close to my heart, a data-driven approach. Loads of data out there, but we must invest in data and technology in order to create those insights and use the spotlight that we have right now with our businesses, with our colleagues, with our workplace teams to establish how we'll change based on what the data is telling us. Love this one. My favourite workplace professional. And finally, this final slide, apart from questions, I believe strongly that we'll see a convergence and a much stronger partnership between corporate real estate, HR and IT. I don't know about you guys, but last few years it's been a very close relationship and that just continues. More than ever before, delivering a high-performing workplace experience will depend on the thoughtful integration of space, people and technology. And to navigate this interdisciplinary field, we'll likely see an evolution in, sorry about this, might make a few of us redundant or maybe relaunch our roles, head of real estate, surely that's an old term now, right? Head of IT, head of FM, towards a more elevated and strategic position of chief workplace officer. Why not? Told you it'd be a bit controversial. Many businesses have already started on this journey with more of a focus on employee experience, well-being, we've heard about that a lot today, and digital transformation and the like. But this concept will push those transitions into overdrive and hopefully shake this industry up a little bit. That's the end of the slides. Told you I'd get you going. So, going to start with a few questions. I'm going to somehow sit down, not quite sure how this will work, and come to Andrew. And how are you doing, Rob?
Very well, thank you.
Good. I'll start with you if that's okay, Rob. So, can you hear me? First question, where are you on a scale between dumping assets and fully home-based? I'm going to go with that.
Well, education industry, or sector, I should say, for universities, schools, it's still going to be almost 100% attendance model if you look in the UK. But if you start thinking about what the future holds, particularly if you look in developing countries, I think the adoption of technology means that you could have schools with specialist teachers all over the world. So you've got a school with only 10 pupils in Southern America, in Africa. You could have a science teacher in there, you could have a language specialist, you could have a maths specialist delivering these lessons in. And particularly in parts of Africa where they've skipped generations and just gone to mobile phone signals, that technology is there, it's just getting it into their classrooms. So I think it's a very exciting sector, particularly for schools in the UK, particularly in the independent sector, start delivering these potential specialist lessons all over the world from somewhere based in the UK. So I think there's huge opportunity there because we've been forced as human beings to start using technology that was already there. And I think that technology is now embedded in our culture. We still use Teams meetings for some people that are in the office on the same campus because it allows us to do, it's less disruptive for them to do a quick meeting than walk all the way across the campus and come to our building. So I think it's an exciting future and something that we need to look forward to.
Cool. And Andrew, where would you say Nationwide is on that spectrum?
Yeah, so in Nationwide, we'd sort of started on the journey pre-COVID to sort of more collaborative, more shared space, more third space, and we're looking at that time, as I call it, the ratio of about 0.6, which really roughly means 2 people to every desk in the building. And we hadn't really been able to answer the conundrum, which is what do you do with the other half of the people who haven't got a desk to go to? And we had this very loose, agile term. I think what COVID did, it just accelerated that journey for us, left us with quite a lot of empty new space, which we're now testing and learning. But are we dumping asset? I think we're squeezing the asset base, but everybody's going to be dumping assets. So asset's not going to have any value.
Yeah.
So we really, as organisations, need to think about what we do with that space and how we use that for ourselves, but also how we use that for the wider communities. So when we're looking to be more locally based, actually, how do we use our branches? How do we make hubs of that so people got access nearer to home? Do we then look for that as community space so people can actually use that for community purposes? Do we look to adapt a shared workplace area so actually that space is available for people from different companies and they become your work colleagues when you need to socialise? And then how does that support the home working? We've had a taste through COVID of what the future is going to be. We've had a taste in the last couple of weeks of what the oil running out is going to be. You know, it's going to be prices going up, and therefore we're going to be in we're talking about 2030 onwards, we're going to get in that position where we're going to a green environment. There'll be restrictions on resources, and therefore we need to think very differently. COVID's been a test of that, and we now need to embrace the learnings from that, and rather than just keep hankering back to the old world and the things we love at the old world, we've got to start adapting to the new world. And that is going to be more remote, and it's going to be coming together. It's going to be a precious time. We've got to use that rightly to socialise, collaborate, and work together, and not just use it as a place to go and have a water cooler moment for 5 minutes and then sit at a desk for 8 hours and work as if you were doing at home. So I think going forward, we've got to start to take all what we've heard today and start to think about it as where will we be in 5 years, where will we be in 10 years, and not say, oh, wouldn't it be great if it was like it was before? And then, so change our mindset. I think that's the key for us.
Yeah, cool. And you, Rob, what's your vision for the 2030 workplace, would you say?
I think it's going to be very interesting. I think particularly for the workplace, you're not going to have a traditional office that's operated by one particular company. It's going to be multi-use space, multi-company space. You could have retail, office and education all in the same property. I do think really if as our workforces get more spread out and they are working from home and the journeys become more difficult commute and you're going to have 2 to 3 days in the office for a team event, do your offices include some accommodation elements for the people to stay over? Is that going to start becoming so it becomes a destination for somebody to go to for 2 or 3 days to work, then they return home? I think that's going to be an interesting decision. I think there's also we're talking about the workplace, I think we should talk about the living place as well. If people are going to be working from home, how are our homes going to adapt to that? Are we going to start looking at multi-use rooms? So we have bedrooms with furniture that folds down and makes a desk, or it folds up and makes a bed. These sorts of products are already available. Are they going to become more common? Are we going to start seeing them in the IKEAs rather than just in the specialist shops online? So how we live and work is going to significantly change. And I think that's going to change how we look at transport, the vehicles we have, the journeys we take, all going to change in the next 10 years significantly. And I think it's nice to be sat on the panel today looking forward rather than some of the stuff that we've had today, which is sort of how we've got to here. And it's now to finish the day that we're actually looking forward and what can we do in the future.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's interesting. I used the word redundancy, the R word earlier, and I think the workplace and the workplace sector that we left in 2019 it is somewhat redundant. I think our challenge now is to redefine that and create that environment that people are coming back to. I just wondered, from a nationwide point of view, I'm your colleague just for a moment, what's bringing me back into the workplace, Andrew? What's drawing me back?
So I think the big thing we're trying to differentiate between collaboration's the big word that everyone uses, but what do they really mean? Do we really know what a collaboration is? And I think we need to start using some real set examples of where a collaboration's brought people together physically and produced something that's worth more than individually or remotely bringing that together.
Yep.
I think more importantly though, colleague of Nationwide, we recognise this need to socialise. And in the workplace, that's not just popping out for a meal or the pub or a coffee at the end of the day or doing the water cooler moment. That's actually making time for people's well-being by allowing them to socialise. And the big thing that's missing in most Nationwide colleagues who are quite content to work at home generally is actually that social element. And we're now starting to recognise that, and we're trying to design for the future where we can actually make that more of an issue. One of our buildings, we're literally converting at the moment to be more like a club room than a meeting room. So effectively focus people on there, not dissimilar to this setting, but nowhere near as grand, obviously. But so you can go somewhere where you can relax. And what we're looking to do that is people can come together in an office building, which is spare space, rather than use a hotel or an external venue, which has got a cost element to it as well. So utilising that dead real estate space for different use, and socialising is going to be a big element of that.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So, next subject, very close to my heart, data and technology. I wanted to talk about that. Do you think you're leveraging that appropriately? Are there any magic insights you could share? How are you using data and technology at the moment, Rob, to drive your strategy?
I think, schools adapted mostly to Teams in my sector. And we had 2 days to set up, change a very conservative bunch of people, which are teachers. I've always done it this way, so that's the only way it can be done, to having to deliver online lessons. And I think we're now in a situation where, as I mentioned earlier, where you don't actually need to be in a classroom to develop an effective lesson. It's just that we're still in that mindset, and I think we're still in the mindset of a parent body expecting pupils to be in school to learn. We learn every day. Every day is a school day. If we learn something new, it's fantastic. And I think how that technology is going to go forward, particularly I think with, as I said earlier, with delivering lessons from overseas, you could have a language assistant from a language specialist from China delivering Mandarin lessons into the UK quite easily. I think it's getting people to just accept that the world has changed. We're not going to go back, politicians do it, we're going to go back to normal. Well, there isn't an old normal, it's the new normal. And the world is always changing, and we have to accept it changes.
Yeah. What about you, Andrew? What does data and technology mean at Nationwide?
So data's interesting. So I'll just sort of try to think of that as you was talking through the question. So most of the data we've been collecting in the last 18 months has been survey data, people's opinion. I think we're probably all a little bit fed up with the last survey that came out, and getting that balance right to get quality data, quality opinions, quality views is an art form that we're going to have to develop going forward. and there's hundreds of the HR professionals in the room still. That there's a number of companies out there who sell you all that insight in terms of data, but actually what's it telling us? Point in time. But how do you then make that current without getting repetitiveness coming in? And how do you then use that to provide insight? Because at the beginning of the pandemic, the survey data was saying we all want to be at home, we all want to be safe. 3 months later, it's saying something different. And now it's saying we're starting to feel a little bit lonely. We want to be out in the world a little bit more. But there's been about 10 different iterations of that through the piece. And then the issue with I'm experiencing now is you've got particularly middle managers, senior managers, their opinion, the anecdotal evidence that is varying from the data. And I'll share a little story if it's okay. One of the big concerns we've been building of late is, we've been measuring all along, has been attrition, and attrition being a really big issue in our industry, especially with the tech side of things. Yep. So we don't have any attrition, but most of the senior managers are calling out in the frontline minutes, we've got an attrition rate. And the HR department said, no, there is no attrition rate. But what the manager actually, when you get the data collected properly, what's happening is, as we've allowed people to work remotely, it's allowed people that were tied to an office, a location, a job type, and now able to look at other role types. So typically a contact centre person went to the contact centre and they were tied into that. Now they can actually work from home and do contact centre work or apply for a role that's keeping them remote from any other others. So what our attrition has been is between different areas of the business. And it was only good use of data which told us that. And so you've got perception there, which is probably the reality, but the data at headline level saying you haven't got a problem. In reality, the problem was deep down, and it took a lot of drilling down using data sets to find that out to prove the anecdotal. So my question is, I guess my point is, don't rely too much on the data and spend it all there, because the anecdotal stuff is probably going to be 9 times out of 10 be the correct answer.
That's a good story. So an even better segue, actually. I think 10 years ago, would I have been sat here talking to a workplace guy about HR data? Absolutely not. And that was the next point I was going to come to, actually. I'm going to mash these three up into one, about the operating model, the slightly maybe controversial view I have about the partnership actually becoming one and no longer a kind of forced partnership. Can you talk maybe, Rob, firstly about how your service model has changed, has adapted, how the teams supporting the workplaces' lives have changed on a day-to-day basis since the first lockdown, and also your experience and your thoughts on that, because I understand it's very different in the educational sector.
Yeah, I mean, we closed schools twice, but still operated for key worker provision and critical worker provision. We had to develop a model in 2 days. That's how much notice we got. Told on a Wednesday, you're closing on a Friday, basically. From the support staff side, the property still existed. So we still operated the property. We still had to get the property going. Our insurers wanted to make sure it checked. We're still paying rates on it. So it didn't change much. We had to change how we did our catering offer and how we did our cleaning, just to make it safe. And then when schools did come back, we had significant changes on class bubbles, teachers moving between lessons, which they weren't happy about, although I thought they'd improve their step count. But I think also, going forward, we need to stop thinking, I mean, it's been mentioned several times here in various presentations today, about hours, working hours. And I think that's an old measure now, that's an input measure. I think if your people are working remotely and they're working differently, they may choose to start really early, then take their children to school, and then do work in the middle of the day, collect the children and finish off their projects in the evening. And I think we've got to get to, as leaders and managers, as an output measure, get away from the fact that somebody should be working, doing their emails at 8 o'clock in the morning, because it's irrelevant if people are working remotely. We need them to do that job once the job's done. And I often use a saying with my team, I'd lead a team but manage the output, I don't manage the people. If I lead the team well and I manage the output, they should be able to manage themselves. And that doesn't work in 100% of cases, but that's the model I like to adopt.
Yeah, good point. We talk a lot about the physical environment. My question was actually around the services, but you moved on to leadership, which I know we all feel quite passionately about. This has been a change. This has been a step change for leadership above everything else, as far as I'm concerned. The presenteeism mindset, the productivity and input-output mindset, the just general way of communicating with people, and the relaxed nature of seeing into people's home lives and getting to know their family, and all these fun and games we've had. What's your view, Andrew, on the importance of leadership and what you've learned as Nationwide?
So I think the thing, Martin, you've alluded to is this role which is sort of talked about around the Chief Workplace Officer, which is sort of a combination of HR, property, facilities and IT. You think about that as a board role. That would be the biggest board role.
That's why I'm pushing for it, Andrew. Come on.
You'd probably only need a chief exec and a chief workplace officer, and maybe something to do with marketing. But I think what we've seen through COVID, and this is what I think a chief workplace officer role is too big. But however, through COVID, we've seen collaboration. We've seen the departments of those three working together very, very closely. And I think that's what we've got to build on. It'd be very easy to just retrench, wouldn't it, into those silos. And I think now's the opportunity for the future. The board shouldn't be siloed. It should be a collaboration of all the different elements working together. So actually COVID's proved that, and that's what we should look for in leadership going forward, that we are considering all of the elements rather than just the bits that are in my control at the board level. So I think that's quite key.
I feel the need for a show of hands, actually. I've just thought of it. I wondered, audience participation, hands up if your business has developed a remote leadership campaign or some training or some useful material for leaders. Just out of pure interest, I'm not taking notes. Yeah, fascinating, isn't it? 2 years on, and literally less than half of the audience have actually invested in it. The amount of money we've wasted, it's unbelievable. Yeah, good point. Thanks. And what about you, Rob, in terms of leadership? How do you see the last 2 years informing the longer term changes we need to make as leaders?
Well, we've needed to adapt, and particularly going, as I said already, you need to get away from the fact that people need to be sat at a desk, at an office, at a time. That world is gone. And it's all very well for CEOs of banks to say, yes, I want everybody in the office, but that doesn't improve productivity necessarily. If you're forcing people to do jobs or travel, I used to commute in London. I would particularly not be comfortable commuting on the tube now. So we have to look, how do we lead to get the best productivity out of people? I think that's the mindset we've got to get to with leaders. How do we get the best out of people? How do we look after their well-being? And there's if we can adapt so they have a better quality family life, that's one thing we've got to go to. I think one of the questions we haven't answered yet, and I can't see an answer at the moment, is it's been mentioned in the Siemens one earlier. Young people, graduates, new joiners to the business. How do you train those if your percentage of your people is working remotely? They may not have the facilities to work at home. They may still be living with their parents. They may still be living in bedsits. They may still be living in shared accommodation. So I think there's security questions around that, if they're doing work that has a secure nature, or business confidentiality issues. So I think that's one thing that's a difficult question to answer. And I think that's one of the things that leaders are going to have to answer, come up with models of mentoring people, and I think it's going to almost be like a closer, you're going to have a mentor of this for a month, mentor of that for a month, mentor of that for a month, and I think that's how you're going to have to do it, rather than the osmosis systems that often happen in workplaces at the moment.
That's a really good approach to it, because I'm sitting there thinking I've got to be really careful when I talked earlier about the future. In my view, and if you got back to one of our answers to that is bring younger people into the office more because they want it and they need it, etc. Well, that's sort of going back to the old way of being, isn't it? As opposed to we can physically get that. If that's not really preparing them for a future in 10 plus years time when it is remote, so we should be looking for different answers, being mentoring of subject matter as they go through their careers.
Totally agree. I wanted to come back to the home space discussion, which I know Rob's very, very passionate about. Just share a little story of our own, really. We've got an award-winning, fantastic wellbeing program, mostly based around physical wellbeing, but over recent years moved more into mental health and mental wellbeing. And during lockdown, a lot of those guys were furloughed, and we lost a lot of the resource. So we decided to bring them back, and we decided to do some man management, as we referred to it in the early days. It's improved since then. That's not very inclusive, I know. So those guys and girls were calling people one-to-one, where there was a historical case with someone with physical ailment, where there was a report from a line manager, where there was a DSE assessment that was completed. They were on the phone with those guys and girls, talking to them, making sure they were safe, making sure they had a program to see them through the next 12 months. And now we're reading about 2 years on, real life-changing stories, how those people have gone on and transformed their physical and mental well-being. And that was just through a very, very small adjustment in the well-being program. I wondered, and just one service, if you like, that we were supporting that homework in that home setup. Have you got any stories, or have you got any thoughts on how the workplace industry can grapple with, okay, now a large percentage of the time is going to be in a non-traditional corporate workplace. Is there a part to play with supporting people whilst they're at home?
Definitely. I just don't know the answer.
Yeah. Or maybe we could debate that. Andrew?
So we've adapted. So within my property team, we've adopted. And it took a little bit of encouragement. We adopted the home as the third workplace. So be it branch, be it office, and be it home. And actually, when you look at home as a workplace, in the same way you'd look at a normal workplace, you can come up with some fairly simple things that help. So make sure that people are comfortable physically and mentally, make sure that they've got all the equipment they need, they've got the accessibility, etc. And if you start to ask those questions, it starts to answer and place that physical space in a similar way that you would treat an office or a branch. So we've adapted that. There's not a big physical program of work to do in that space, but suddenly it becomes your health and safety side of thing, your mental well-being issues, and just the big thing I think with all of this is we've got to start, as leaders, managers, we've got to start to think of all our people as individual and understand them as individuals. And that's the big change that we're going to need, and I think the home environment can bring to that, because you've got to know what they're about, what they're doing, what motivates them, as opposed to a block of 100 people sitting in the desks in front of you in the very old days when I was an early draftsman many years ago, producing output and being seen as one. There's 100 individuals out there who we need to take into account. I think that's going to be the big change we'll see through homework in driving the understanding of individuals. Yeah,
there's a nice little trend going on sort of West Coast, North America at the moment, where this player personnel coach, which you discussed earlier, in universities, and it's always been the case, every individual gets that mentoring, that support, that one-to-one touch point on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, depending on which program they're on. They're now invested in doubling into the levels of resources, so you get double the amount of time in recognition that most people are at home for 50% of the time at least. I wonder if that sort of player coach, that player personnel role could become part of the workplace service going forward. Another wacky thought.
Absolutely, I think that's really what the focus of managers needs to be. So in that player coach role, you're in the team. You're not leading the team as the manager or whatever. You're in the team, but you're actually focus inward as much as you focus outward, and that's quite key, because career progression often for most organisations mean looking outward and upward, and actually we need to then start rewarding looking inward and developing them. The people should sort of nearly nominate the leaders, because they come out from within the teams, because it's those people who should shine rather than those people who made an impression by ignoring their team.
Yep, good point. Going to come on, 2 more questions and then we'll get to some discussion. We could do another hour probably to debate sustainability, because there's so many angles to it, and I know we've got some sustainability professionals in the audience, but just for maybe we'd take a couple of minutes each and explain what does sustainability mean for Nationwide in respect to longer term workplace future, and the same for yourself, Rob.
So incredibly important for Nationwide. We are operationally, I've got to be really careful with the terminology, we're operationally carbon neutral now. We buy most of our we buy all of our electricity green, and any gas use, we effectively, well, we offset. So we aim to be carbon zero operationally by 2030, and we're looking at across the whole organisation. It becomes a lot more difficult because with scope 3 emissions, you're responsible for the money you loan. You're responsible for the things that are non-green on the money you loan. So as we mainly make our money from mortgages, we've got an awful battle around homes, and because it's only homes rather than commercial. Massive agenda there to get rid of Cat 3 emissions. But scope 3, sorry. But there's an interesting. I heard earlier on. I think it was the Virgin was saying that half of their carbon emissions come from commuting versus their operation. We don't have that number. So commuting is important, but it's quite a small part of our sustainability on it. And then home working comes in as well. And again, a lot's played around the home working and increasing, but what we're doing is we're encouraging green electricity deals, switching, etc. Through what we'd offer our members, we can offer to our colleagues and encourage them when they're working at home to switch green energy deals and have a sustainability package for home as well. Encourage that as well as the office. So
cool.
That's a number of things we're doing.
I wish we'd talked through that answer first, Andrew. You made my description of ARM's approach very easy, much the same. I think the only difference I'd add is that we've invested a lot more recently, colleague in the audience, in a kind of social engagement program built on an incentivised kind of opt-in program as well. So we're a people business ultimately. We don't make anything. We don't ship things into containers. We design IP. So for us, people are central to everything we do. So that engagement, that buy-in, and additionally the data we can collect for Scope 3, for example, is all important. So that's the only add-on. But thanks for saving us a few minutes. Rob, yourself?
Well, I have an historic building portfolio. Listed buildings, conservation zone, and one of the things that's from a sustainability perspective I think is going to be very interesting is how we tackle the space heating, because air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps just won't retrofit with the current technology into the spaces we've got. And I think the emergence of hydrogen as a heating product and how that works, I think that's going to be very interesting technology in the next few years. And I'm hoping that gets to a point where we can be more sustainable with our carbon, because our gas consumption is huge. Luckily, we bought our gas quite a number of years ago. Forward purchased it from Gazprom, which is Russian state-owned, so we should be okay. But it'll be very interesting where we get. Waste is an interesting issue that we have. We are pushed by our students, but then we also see our students' behaviour that sort of counteracts that. So that's very interesting. We want to improve our recycling figures. Okay, then so you've got to have 2 bins, and you've got to put one type of waste in one and one type of waste in the other. And 50% of the class do, 50% of the class don't. So then it's all contaminated waste, so it all goes off to be sorted. So it's interesting debate. We've got, from a sustainability point of view, we're trying to reduce the amount of meat we use as well. That's a push from the students. One thing we haven't found a solution for yet is the amount of consumption we use for single waste plastics in the kitchens. That's still a challenge, but we've managed to stop our food suppliers. Our food comes in cages. I mean, we serve over 2,000 meals a day every lunchtime. All our food used to come in cages, fully wrapped with cling film. That stopped. Managed to get that stopped just by talking to them. You're not doing it anymore. Didn't add anything. It just made it a bit more secure. If you shut the door and lock it, it's fine. So there's all sorts of things you can do around sustainability, and I think it's just thinking about things. And do you need to print the document to take to the meeting, or should you just take your laptop in and screen? And I know other people have mentioned, you'll do emails, but that's only if the meeting's boring. If the meeting's meaningful and short and well run, there won't be time for people to do their emails. So I think you're looking at it from the wrong perspective. You're looking at it, it's a leadership thing. You've got to look at it differently.
Well, you now, I'm just looking around, maybe this should be our magic wand. So we all each have a magic wand. If you had that, what would be the one thing about Workplace that you would change between now and 2030? And I'm going to start off. just because we were debating it earlier during the break. For me, we talked about lots of things. I'm not going to duplicate what I've already said. For me, it's around the change leadership and change management that we have across the industry and across our businesses. Is great ideas, great concepts, great new ways that are really pushing forward. And I love the Virgin presentation and all the things that we can do. Similarly with the Siemens presentation. But without change management, engagement, taking people on the journey, and actually listening to what the hell the business and our colleagues need in the first place before, thinking we have all the answers, it will all be, folly. It will lead us to nowhere. But I think we can maximise our impact as an industry by really taking people on that journey. And I don't see enough workplace people with that kind of experience and rigour around change management. We don't often have time, granted. But just with that little adjustment, more of a focus on engagement and change management, I think we can have a much, much wider impact. So there's my magic wand, and I'm passing to Rob. You'll all have a chance. Well, some of you will. I don't know if we've got time.
I think it's to stop people saying we're going to get back to normal. There isn't a normal. There was. COVID's here. It's here to stay. We'll have to live with it. Our world's changed, and we have to accept the world's changed and just move on. I think I'm getting fed up with listening to politicians saying, let's do this, let's get back to normal, let's do this. It's not there. We're not comfortable. I was debating with my wife earlier about going on holiday, and it's when we're comfortable enough to go on a plane again, when we're comfortable enough to go to these places that could be crowded, particularly overseas, what's their vaccination rates like, what protocols are going in place, and it's when we're comfortable to go. And I think it's that acceptance that the world has changed and moved on, and let's just get on with it and start looking forward instead of looking back.
Yep. You have the power, Andrew.
I think for me, it's actually by 2030, the workplaces become fully inclusive. And I don't mean that as in, well, I do mean it in the way that it's inclusive of everybody. So everybody's considered as I said earlier, as individuals, and we take that into account, and we spend and invest all of our time in making that work. Because what we really want to do is just put people in boxes and then deal with them en masse, because it's a lot easier. And I think that's what we need to learn to do as organisations, is actually treat everybody as an individual. And that's a massive problem, because you think there's millions of individuals there that need dealing with. But that's the big change I'd like to see.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you, panel. That's been brilliant. I've just had a time check, and we've got about 4 minutes left, I think. So, love to throw this towards someone and catch it, and if there's any inspiration or one final thing that we want to see Workplace move towards. But if not, we'll open it up to questions, and it'd be great if we can use the microphone, because we couldn't hear a word earlier at a couple of the sessions, if that's okay. Any questions, anyone? Hey, right at the front. Nice. I can hear you, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay. So you've been talking about, especially at the end, about making things individual for people and focusing on individuals, which I think is great. But from a wider context, I'm just wondering, does that also fit in with where potentially we're going to be in 20, 30 years if the population is the same and we have less skilled workers? Because I think overall, for what I'm reading, and I work for the Ministry of Justice, we have such a huge turnover of particularly prison staff. We lose 300 a month that we are trying to replace and train, and we are going to have real problems in that area. And I'm assuming that this individual treatment of people is going to be needed to take on across the board to attract people and to retain people.
Yep.
Is that part of the thinking as well?
Certainly for me, I've always been an advocate of, how can you look after 4,000 employees, 5,000 employees if you can't look after yourself, meaning the workplace team? It starts at home. It starts with the core support services and teams for me. And that culture, that approach, and the focus on leadership has to run throughout the business, not just an outward-facing piece.
I think that inclusivity is why the first question was actually why are they leaving, and it's actually there'll be 300 different reasons maybe, or there may be some trending in there, so hence the data comes into play there. But it's actually being able to, the bit I was trying to get to is being able to react to that as an organisation. So actually, it may be okay that you in some industries that 300 people leave and there's 300 new people come in and you get that moving through. So that may be a way of dealing with that particular issue. Others it may not be acceptable, but there may be some reasons because of the lack of flexibility, the lack of inspirational leadership within those is what's causing that. And to me, addressing these issues is about spending more time looking inwardly and understanding and working with it, as opposed to just saying, well, there's 300, we think it's X, can't do anything about X in your case because it's government driven, wages driven, treatment driven of the individuals, and therefore we'll park it and move on and try and come up with some grand scheme that will stop that going forward. So I think it's a case of making it more fitting it to what we need, bespoking it, as opposed to just one size fits all. I think that's key.
A chance for one more, do you think? Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, cool. One more question, I think, audience. Make it a good one. It's the last one of the day. No pressure.
Nobody wants to take the mantle.
Oh, sorry, I put on too much pressure. No. Thank you. Thanks for a great conference as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, panel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.